Welcome to the Great Distraction.
Hello again, folks. This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is Title Me Entitled. My name is Ben, and with me today are my co-hosts Thomas.
How's it going?
Rick.
Hey, buddy.
And Glenn.
Hello.
If this is your first time listening, welcome. We thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of topics, and we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, just a little something to ponder. Entitlement generation was originally what we were going to title this episode, but we got a little clever with it. Basically, what this generally applies to or is associated with is, you guessed it, millennials. And this topic has we have to deliver or discuss with a little bit of a grain of salt, for lack of a better term, because 3 out of the 4 of us are actually considered millennials. So, however, in our defense...
Not me.
Yeah. However, in our defense, we're at the very change of that generation. So actually it depends on what standard you look for. Well, I'll say up front, there is no standard. There is no set dates or years, depending on what source you look at, what constitute it's a millennial or a Generation X or a Generation Z, whatever, even baby boomers, kind of varies within 3 to 5 years or so, for the start years and the end years or whatever. But for most things that you'll look out there and see, you'll find that the millennials are considered 1981 to 1996. If you're born in those, within that time frame there, you are considered a millennial, again, depending on which source you look at. And we are also, or those millennials are also known as the me generation. And this term, from my research, was coined, I don't know if it was originally coined, but it was definitely made popular by a Time magazine article that we'll get into here that got real popular. We'll get into here in a little bit. But basically, it was a play off of the baby boomers generation. And the baby boomers generation, apparently, at their time, by the generation before them, so I mean, this would be like our grandparents at this point, they called the baby boomer generation the me generation. And at that time, before the baby boomers, which I believe were called the silent generation. I don't know. You'd have to look into
Silent
that now.
but deadly.
They were the silent generation. They
Old farts.
They started seeing and thinking and perceiving the baby boomer generation to be narcissistic, to be very self-centered, which is very close along the lines of what people say about the millennials and this whole entitlement generation, is that the level of self-centered, selfish nature, narcissistic, entitled, owed to them, mentality is very prevalent.
I wonder if that goes back to skipping a generation. Sometimes people talk about like skips a generation, like diseases skip a generation sometimes with people.
Well, this is in order, though.
Well, I know, but it seems like the boomers were the people that were originally getting called selfish little brats, and their grandchildren are the millennials.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's a skipped a generation.
Yeah, maybe.
Sort of.
And so, just for a little bit of reference there, the baby boomers were, I don't have the start date on that, but it was previous to 1965. Generation X is 65 to 80, so they're the ones right before the millennials. Current generation is Generation Z, for zombie, 1997 to now. And, so it kind of stands the question right there, why, starting from, I guess, people who were in the post-World War II time, right, because that would be the parents of the baby boomers, why did people of that time start seeing the generation after, and then therefore the generation after, and therefore the generation after, and continue down to where we are now, as more and more narcissistic and self-centered and entitled?
Well, for one, when you said baby boomer, what era did you say? Because I think I disagree with what you said.
Baby boomer is before 65.
Baby boomers are post-World War II.
Those are the babies post-World War II, not the parents.
Yeah. So I can't remember the exact date. I'd have to look it up if one of you guys wants to pull up that date. But yeah, before Generation X was the baby boomer generation. Because
I don't agree with that.
So Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So most people who were born in the early 80s, mid 80s don't consider themselves millennials either. Yet, if you look at every definition, because again, there's no hard definition of it.
So as I understood it, the children born from the people that returned from World War II and started.
So right there, yeah. Hold on. So Thomas has it up. It's 1946 to 1964, which is before Generation X, is the baby boomers. So those are the.
That's
kids.
what I was just saying before.
Yeah. Those are the
That's
kids.
post World War II kids. Like my mom is a baby boomer.
Correct.
My mom was born in 48.
Okay.
That's how I always refer to it.
Okay, so then the silent generation was before 46, 40,
Yes.
40, so 45, before 45.
Yeah.
Those were the people that grew up in the Great Depression and then went off to war. Yes.
That's what I was trying to say on the timeline. Sorry, I think
it.
I got it confused.
Okay.
I think we're on the same. We were on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was changing during those times, where I was kind of getting at here, that started making people more self-centered, narcissistic? So all these.
I think a lot of this kind of ties down to how we live as a culture and a society. You have automatic washing machines, dryers. We
had a lot less to be concerned about.
Sure.
And just like, go ahead.
A luxurious life, I think
Right.
is what you're getting at.
The microwave oven.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it makes sense that playing along those lines and continuing that timeline out to now, we have a lot less now to worry about than we did even in that time, right?
Right. And I think it's pretty common that every generation says that the generation following them is lazy and
True.
And
because they have to worry about less
disrespectful and stuff like that. And I think where a lot of that comes from, especially with like the baby boomer generation, their parents, like I said, grew up during the Great Depression. They were fighting for food. People were starving. There wasn't work, and then they go off to Europe and the South Pacific and fight in a hideous war, and then come home and do what we believe it's a parent's job to do, is to make your children's life simpler and easier, and they become compliant to that. And the adults look then at the next generation and be like, man, life was hard for me when I was 13. You guys have it so fucking easy that you're just whining about your goddamn iPad, not having to, shovel snow or whatever, or fight the Nazis to fucking...
Or walk uphill
get by.
both ways for 3 miles to get to school every day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or go out and kill the actual food on the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother's generation, they didn't really have convenience of like grocery stores and stuff. That was a generation that was still producing their own food, still hunting their own food. I mean, their work that they had to do to just survive the basic day-to-day was a lot heavier on them, and it made it a lot tougher, more callous people. But the baby boomers, that's the thing, is when we came back from World War II, we had developed this industry that could make and manufacture all these great new fantastic devices. And if you look at advertising from the 50s and everything post-war, oh, look at this washing machine. Because before World War II, we were still scrubbing things out, on a washboard.
Yep.
So yeah, everything got easier.
And it was available to everyone. Everyone post-World War II ideally had a car and a lawnmower and a washing machine and a refrigerator. You didn't have to work for it. And also, during our grandparents' generation, it was very common that people wouldn't finish high school because they had to stay home and work on the farm or find a job to help support the family. And then that went away. The baby boomer generation, they were all graduating high school, and it was also becoming more common to go to college for the average person, right? So whereas nowadays, it's not even a question whether or not you're going to finish high school. It's most likely you're going to finish college, and now you have to go into grad school to even compete on an academic level with anyone.
Yeah. Times they are changing.
Yeah, weird sidetrack, but yeah.
No, actually, that's exactly where the reason I brought those questions up is because that's exactly where I wanted to segue into. The first thing I wanted to start off with this topic is I wanted to be very careful that we don't just sit here and make this a millennial, millennial bashing, fest or whatever, mostly because we're from the same generation. So starting off in their defense. Those things that you guys just said is exactly, along the lines of what I was getting at there. As I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of what had come from this Time Magazine article was not backed by really any hardcore stats. Because how do you even pull stats like that? We don't. That would be
just make them up.
Well, yeah. They pulled them from some sources, and when I was reading parts of the article or whatever that were quoted or whatnot, they had studies from this university or that university, but then they don't go off to tell you how what was the sampling size? I mean, the general types.
Or who
of,
funded that
yeah,
study?
Yeah, exactly. The same game everything plays. Anyway, as far as studies and whatever go. So right off the bat, the other thing too is I wanted to say it was very much marketed as a I don't want to say old school because this article came out in 2013, but it was very much marketed as a clickbait type, shock title like, oh, I better pick that up and read that. And it was geared towards the baby boomers because their kids are the
Self-centered millennials.
Yeah, and then, the Generation X, Generation Millennials, whatever, which I guess is Y, Generation Y. So, I mean, it was very much aimed towards these people to do what? Sell magazines, right? And sell, get people to click on the website and read through it or whatever. And so anyway, that being the case, was it a totally fair claim being that these, sources and that it was just put together to sell magazines? At that time, to try and make it a little more fair, we were coming out of a recession. We were in the recession. If you follow those years, when for all of us, just to think about your own life, right? I mean, we're all considered, well, except for Tom's, we're all considered the millennials here. We remember the early 2000s with the recession and 2005, 2006, and then coming out of college or coming out of school. I mean, there weren't that many jobs. Unemployment was very low. Unemployment was high, rather, for the U.S., so it was hard to find a job at these times. Many of us that came out of college came out with extremely high debt. So it's not like you just have to, all the money that you did, the little money that you did make went right back into paying your student loans.
That's what you get for going to college.
Well, I mean, assume if you have something else to fall back on, great.
Hey man, I just went to work.
Yeah, there you go. There was, like I said, there was also a recession that affected, everyone was affected by, not just millennials, and it affected everybody. I mean, people lost their homes who were not from our generation, right? So I kind of wanted to set that as a groundwork, to at least keep in everyone's mind, fresh in everyone's mind, that as people pour out this hate on our generation and those within it, some of the earlier parts of that generation came into the world and grew up and became adults into the world, into this country that was a little tougher than, not anybody else had it, right? But it was not a super simple, easy time.
I didn't see people starving on the side of the road, man.
No, but when was the last time we saw that? I mean, well, negating like the homeless people that we see. I mean, we have a huge homeless problem here in California, but so I mean, it could be said that we're in those circumstances right now, and the economy's doing great. So yeah,
and even then, the homeless people are not starving.
No, they're not. I mean, people are handing them food day in and day out. I sit there and watch it. Anyway, but. Yeah, so no, it's not bread lines, it's not stock market crash, it's not, what we saw was the housing market crash, and some other things that associated with that went down too. But you're right, it was never, I mean, I personally didn't feel any pinch from it, but, a lot of people did. So nevertheless, just wanted to try and establish that there was some general countrywide hardships at the time that these people were coming of age.
Okay, but those hardships weren't anything that were, it affected the way of people's lifestyle, I suppose. But
yeah.
I mean, most of that effect was in their luxuries. It wasn't true survival. Honestly, on the scheme of things, it wasn't that huge of an issue.
I completely agree, but I was trying to throw...
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who wouldn't agree, though. I mean, there's
yes.
people who were on the wrong end of things. I have several friends who lost houses and stuff and all kinds of different things because, and not necessarily that they were stupid in what they did. They were doing what they thought was what they were supposed to do.
Or they were screwed by, they didn't understand what they were doing. They
Exactly.
were screwed by these banks and their loans and all their crap or whatever. Or they lost their job because their company went, down.
But again, that's financial. It's not a danger to their life. It's a danger to their convenience and their perceived livelihood, sure, but
yeah.
True,
my brother and I have been joking about this forever because we come from poor, very poor working class people, and when the recession hit, we were like, "Wow, now everybody's like us." Welcome to the pool. Get over on the small side.
Yep, get the government cheese.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Yes, along those lines. Now, one of the definitions that gets assigned to this generation a lot, and we had already mentioned this several times, is the self-centered, narcissistic mentality, but nobody ever offers a suggestion as to why it is people got like that or how it is we came to that point. And that was one of the things I started thinking, like, well, wait a minute, take a look at what's around us every day and what we're raised with, because you have to think if people are coming up this way, if they're growing up this way, they're probably being surrounded by something that promotes that. on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if you've listened to our throwaway culture episode. I don't remember the episode number, but the mentality was behind that was that if people are growing up thinking that everything is replaceable, relationships, their cars, their clothes, I mean, it starts expanding out to everything else, like your friendships, your family. It's like, well, shit, I could just get another one. I'm not too worried about it. Everything's replaceable.
Yeah, it changes your personal perception of the value of everything.
Exactly. So if you think about what people on our generation were growing up seeing, like reality TV shows, selfies, social media, fame obsessions, technology addictions, these are all things that are me, me, me. How can I? And these are role models set up that are focused on themselves. So we were kind of brought up surrounded by people who were self-centered, narcissistic, and just kind of completely selfish individuals.
And I think also with our generation, I remember this being kind of a common thing when I was a child growing up. A lot of parents were overemphasizing that each child was special, right?
Yeah.
And I think that also feeds the entitlement or the narcissism that you're talking about.
Participation trophies.
Definitely.
Yeah, I want to get there.
Yeah. Well, let's lead in. That was where I wanted to go. Were you going to say something, Thomas?
No, that's
Okay.
exactly how I was leading.
That's exactly where I wanted to lead this whole thing too. Does this start in early childhood? So we've identified some things that that I could think of rather about what is going on in our society around us that is lending to this idea and mentality of how one should perceive themselves with respect. I guess that's ego, right? Because it's how one perceives themselves within their surroundings, right? That would be how we form our ego.
Sure.
Okay. So how people are forming the ego, this ego that is leading to this narcissistic mindset. And so it's got to start in childhood. And that was kind of
parenting.
It absolutely does.
parenting. That's what I was going for, right? So the first thing I thought of was no spanking and no discipline.
That's a big part of the start. So I appreciate that physical abuse or even verbal abuse is not a great way to discipline children, right? But that doesn't give you an excuse not to discipline your children. Now, again, I don't have children yet, and I'm going to judge the shit out of everybody fucking from my armchair over here. But I see a lot
Go,
of
Mr. America.
younger people that grow up without the understanding consequences, right? So they just get wild and crazy and do whatever the fuck.
Well, there's
they
no
want.
boundaries too, and so I was at a Christmas thing a couple of years ago, and some friends of mine, I'm just going to say they're hippies, and they had a lot of their hippie friends hanging out with them. Whatever. I'm not saying anything bad about hippies. I'm just saying so we all know what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And they're very, like everything's cool, man. Everybody's together. Well, I'm like, that's a great attitude you have, but it doesn't seem to work in the long haul of watching you guys. And so there was a prime example of this whole ideology that just makes me laugh. This kid that was the biggest brat the entire day, running around. It was the kid that I wanted to just strangle the whole time. And at one point, she ripped something out of another kid's hand. And this older lady, who was probably 70, stood up and said, "Hey, don't do that. No." Her mom came screaming out of the back corner and said, "No, we don't tell her no. We say it's not available." And I looked at her and I was like, and I was already pissed at this kid. And I was like, well, how the hell is that kid going to learn any sort of boundaries?
Yep.
Right.
You see them in the supermarket sometimes in these yuppie areas, right? Their kids throwing a tantrum on the ground, or their kids grab
And
something
they just act
throws
like they don't hear it.
And they walk up to him and they try and talk to him. Now, Tommy, what's bothering you? Tell mommy what's wrong. And, dude, you don't converse with the freaking kid.
Dude,
you slap it.
My brother, yeah. Just like, wait, no, slap it. But my brother made a statement years ago because he has 3 kids and they're all grown now. And when his son was a teenager, he was like, "I don't want to be his friend. I hate that little brat. I'm his dad. It's me that keeps him in line.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't like me now, that's okay."
That's how I was raised too. I'm not your friend.
that's
I'm your
your
dad.
job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As a parent, you need to be a parent. You can be a friend when they're in their 20s, 30s,
Yeah, when they're at your IQ level.
Right. When they are a grown adult,
When they move out
then
at
it's
29.
time to be their friend.
When you've finished your job and you've built a good adult, and then you can be friends with them, right?
Yeah.
They don't need a buddy. They need someone to give them structure.
Structure.
Yeah,
Yep.
And guidance.
including discipline, guidance.
Yeah.
Yes,
And you know,
exactly.
to get on this whole spanking thing,
Preach on, Glenn.
okay, pain is an instructor. It teaches. We learn from painful experience. I'm not saying to beat a child.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a difference between discipline and abuse.
Oh, absolutely.
But we learn when something hurts us. Oh, okay, that hurts. I'm not going to do that again.
Fire
When you-
hot.
Yeah, it's when you stick your
Right.
finger in the flame, you learn real quick.
Right.
That's how we're supposed to learn.
So this,
Yes.
you can't touch your own kid. I'm sorry, but
Now,
And the pendulum swung even further than that. Parents aren't allowing other people
Yeah.
to give their children structure and discipline. So for a while, it was like the children weren't getting discipline at home. They were expecting the schools to teach their kids, how to be adults.
Which is bad parenting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then now, a buddy of mine, his wife's a teacher, and she prefers to teach in the lower income, impoverished schools because there is less interference from the parents. If she were in a nicer school district, the parents would. She had issues with the parents arguing with her over their child being disruptive, arguing with her over their children's grades, and whether or not they felt that their children had to do homework. It's like, so instead of you teaching your children to do their job and do what they're supposed to do, you're teaching them that, well, my mom and dad are just going to make it okay and I can do whatever the fuck I want.
So you don't matter.
you're coddling
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah. On top of that, you're also teaching them. One of the notes I had here was that you're also teaching them what the parents can't do. So if they will not spank them, then there's no fear of spanking. I know my mom's not going to hit me. So what is she going to do? She's going to talk to me. Well, I'm going to keep throwing this tantrum because I know if I keep throwing the tantrum, eventually she'll break, and then that's really the boundary that they're. And that's what Thomas has said. There's no boundary.
Yeah.
That's the boundary that you're actually setting. Is
Yeah.
I can get what I want.
If I just keep this up.
Just keep this up.
And another thing too is I don't know when this happened too, but I've seen kids say things like, their parents get mad at them and they'll use things like, "Oh, if you hit me, I'll tell the police or
There
I'll
you
tell
go.
somebody."
Even
or
little
some-
kids that don't even know how to
I
call
know,
the
how
police
hell
will
did
say
they
that.
figure that out? When I was a kid, if I talked back to my mom, I knew there'd be a shallow grave in the backyard.
Yeah.
I did not do that.
Or if I behaved like that in public, if I didn't get disciplined by my mom, I'd get disciplined by strangers in the store.
That
Right.
was more of a community. That was
Yeah.
back when we still had more of a communal feel, I think, in our general social thing. I was having a conversation the other day with somebody about the European general philosophies of life. Like a lot of places you go in Europe, people don't throw trash out because they've all kind of made this decision that this is the right thing to do. And here we've made these decisions where we're just going to let kids run amok. We can't spank them. We can't guide them. It's no wonder if your kids turn out to be a complete moron and you never said no, or you never gave them guidance, or were never the stern, if you're not the stern person that tells them what's wrong and what's right, the person that's going to do that is going to be a cop.
Yeah.
Or somebody on a gang or something. You have to step in and be an aggressive parent
I'll
to
take it-
structure someone's life.
I'll take it one step further. If your kid doesn't turn out right, period, it's very, very, very much your fault. Barring some mental illness or something that you really
Serial
can't
killer.
control. Yeah, I mean, some people are just genetically a problem or not a healthy individual. But I mean, for the most part, man, it's your job to structure this human being, as it was for our parents, long ago, and for the parents that raised you. So you can blame them to a certain degree, but I mean, you can't blame them for everything. Obviously, at some point you're going to make your own choices, but not when they're young. Going back to the boundaries things, it is human nature for humans to test boundaries. We do it as children, we do it as kids, we do it as adolescents, we do it as adults. Everybody is constantly boundary testing. How fast can I drive in the car before the cop catches me? Or how many times can I steal this piece of candy and shove it in my mouth before mom gets me?
We need to know where we fit in our social structure.
Absolutely. It's all part of that
It's
ego
a
construction.
pecking order.
Yeah.
We poke our friends. Our siblings. If you grew up with a brother or sister, you have a competition there to establish some variety of dominance, some sense of where you fit within these social structures.
Absolutely.
So it is part of our behavior to test these things.
That's right. And if you test them without punishment or without
Consequence?
thank you, that's what I was looking for, and you learn to take advantage of these things, then you ultimately learn that there is a way that you can do whatever you want. Now, what
End
does
up with a bunch of lawyers.
Yeah. And now what does that sound like? That sounds like entitlement. You breed, as an enabler, a parent that enables a child to breed entitlement into their very early childhood development ages. And I mean, to me, that was like, wow, that's one definite early source of where people get this mentality that they are owed or can do whatever they want as long as they find a way to do it and get away with it.
Right.
Or they believe that the community or that society owes it to them.
Somebody
Right.
owes it to them
Yeah.
because in the beginning, if I want that candy that's in the line as we're checking out in the store, and I know that there's a way I can either take it or my parent or yell and scream, my mom will buy it, whatever. I know there's a way I can get that no matter what.
Well, I think another thing too is our society has been breeding this sort of mentality. It's the I got mine, I'm going to get mine. It's me, it's all focused on me, me, me. And if you look at like pop culture, especially from the 80s moving forward, it's been very decadent. It's been very what you can get, what you can achieve, what you can materialistic. It's just push, push, push. So it's almost like it's okay to grow up and be a shrewd businessman as long as you're getting paid.
Yeah, as long as you're getting yours. Yeah, that goes. Yeah, exactly, definitely. Yeah, and so another angle I had seen with that too is that played kind of along the same lines is spoiling a child is kind of along the same lines. But if they don't get discipline from the parents, and then let's say they go to the grandparents to stay or see them every once in a while or babysit by them or whatever, and the grandparents just spoil them, just constantly, yes.
So constantly being hit with the reward center.
Yes, that's what I was going at. Just over-rewarding and no punishment.
But that's typically a pretty short period of time.
Unless you go to grandparents every day, or unless you go to somebody else's house who's spoiling you. Maybe your own parents spoil you.
Well, a lot of parents dump their kids off to their grandparents.
Yeah. And so how is that? How is the structure that is being supposed to be handed out and built up in that in that child's mind being continued at the grandparents' house? And how much time are they spending there, or the babysitter's house, or whatever, wherever your sister, your brother, whoever's watching your kid, when you're not, or at home? Or again, too, are you overstimulating the reward center? Everything's supposed to be a balance in life. If you should be. I guess there might be some angel kids out there who don't need any discipline at all and can somehow figure out how to learn the boundaries of society and become perfect humans themselves. But I don't believe it. So are you punishing as much as you're rewarding? Because again, I guess it goes back to a simple human trait. You don't know pleasure if you don't know pain. There simply is no. You can't have one without the other.
I learned what a belt felt like pretty young.
Me too.
And I never wanted to experience it again. I shaped up like.
Right.
Me too.
How I
never
learned.
got in trouble after that.
Nope, nothing scared me worse.
In the kitchen of my mom's house, there were 2 wooden paddles. One had my brother's name on it, and one had mine on it. My brother's had been taped back together multiple times, and mine was damn near flawless. Because I just watched him and went, "Don't do that."
Yep. Sorry for the noise, guys. It's pouring rain out here today, and our recording area here is in a metal roofed warehouse.
We're in a 10. Please fund us.
We don't have much money for a fancy recording studio. But anyway, so yeah, if you can hear that, it's not static. It's actually rain and wind outside. So we'll try and talk over it. Along raising, going back to we still wanted to talk more about the raising kids. You can be anything mentality. This is something that really bugged me growing up, because I remember in school, I heard it all the time. You are the millennials, right? You are the class of whatever, 2000, 2001, 99, whatever. You're a big thing. And you can be anything you want to be.
Sure.
I can be spaghetti.
And you could be meatballs.
Whoa. I always had a problem with that, because I knew even as a kid, I was like, wait, you mean I could be president of the United States? Oh, no, there is no way in hell I could ever have been president of the United States. And
you can't say that, though. Maybe if you would have started in politics, and maybe you would have...
Yeah, whatever. I mean,
who knows?
There's something that they should tell these kids along the lines, right after they say you can be anything. But let me talk to you about statistics. Statistically speaking, you will not be a majority of these things that you might want to be. You want to be an astronaut? Probably not, kid. But
hey, strive for it.
That's right. So I always preferred teaching the angle. I always preferred the angle that I had heard. If you aim for the moon and you miss, you still land amongst the stars. So you shoot for the moon, and you're not going to fail too far off, and you're still going to be way better than if you never left the planet, so to speak, or you never left the city or whatever, the building. But
you never left your bedroom.
If you never, exactly, yeah. So, but it
your
does.
parents' basement.
Wait, we sell basements?
We're getting there. If you only believed that statement and you just constantly, told yourself that was it, then that kind of breeds a mentality like you can be whatever you want to be, dude. Don't worry, you don't need to fight for it. Because they don't add any of that. All they say is you can be whatever you want to be. They don't say if you work hard at it. They don't say if you define the right steps and lay it out and follow a path. They don't add any caveat. They just said you can be whatever you want to be. And when you say this to a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, it's a whole different story than. It's got no no logic.
I disagree. That was how it was always explained to me, was you can be anything you want if you work hard enough for it.
Oh, okay.
And the way
Who added that?
It was my parents.
Your parent. Okay,
Right.
good. That
But-
means your parents did some good parenting. Where
Right.
I heard this was in school.
Yeah,
And
so
they didn't have that.
it's-
The way
It's-
remember it, though, was that the point was that everybody can go to college now. Anybody can be a doctor. You don't have to come from a rich family.
No.
You can come from a poor family, and if you work hard enough, you too can be a doctor. You too can be a president. And that was how I remember that being expressed to me.
It's establishing goals and the process of following through with those goals. How to set and work towards what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to good parenting. I mean, my dad was an engineer, and when I was a kid, he would always tell me, anything that you want to do, anything that's been done in this world has been done by humans. You're a human. You just have to have a plan, and you have to understand that anything that you want to do takes steps. So, like building a model or building a career, everything takes steps. So I was fortunate enough to grow up with around that mentality of like, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but if you don't do every step, you're probably not going to get there. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the time. That's what I think is missing a lot now with this.
I think it just got reduced down, they just throw it out quicker.
Got watered out
It got
or
watered out,
something.
yeah. So the only thing that remained is you can be anything you want to be. And from
But get away from me.
From what I read, that actually started in the 70s. And it was designed to instill self-confidence in kids because nothing was, they were teaching people, but they weren't necessarily instilling self-confidence in those standard old, age-old practices of teaching kids.
You know what? The good ruler across the wrist was.
Well, that teaches you what not to do. But again, what does punishment breed? What was self-confidence? No, it just tells you what not to do and establishes boundaries, which is also helpful. But in those systems, sometimes was there also a good positive reinforcement when you did some encouragement? When you
the
did
gold
something
star,
good?
man.
Yeah, if there, in the 70s were there gold stars? I don't know
about that.
Maybe. But and then the other thing too is, did the gold star actually mean anything to the kid? Just because some of the kids got excited about it, maybe you got that one kid over there in the corner like, dude, I don't give a shit about your gold stars.
I think that depended on the teacher. I had a teacher that.
And how much they built it up.
Well, the gold stars could be exchanged for a
Yes, I remember that.
A cookie?
a treat or a
sticker
prize or
Okay.
yeah.
Something you get out of a 25. I want to say wishing well because most people probably don't know what that is. But anyways, like something you get out of a 25-cent machine.
Gumball machine.
Yeah, gumball machine or whatever. Some piece of candy.
They turned it into currency.
Yes,
Oh,
they
yeah.
turned it into currency.
Yeah, well, I started school in the 70s, in grade school in the 70s, and you either got a good grade or you didn't. There wasn't any extra bonuses for showing up. You're here, you're amazing.
Bingo.
You're here, now do something.
That's a great transition to where I wanted to go to. We already mentioned it before, but giving awards that everyone gets so that nobody
Participation
feels
award.
left out. That's a problem. Not everybody deserves an award. And you don't get an award just because you don't get to, so you don't feel bad because somebody else got one. That's part of life. That's an important part of life.
Hey,
It
man, the
sucks when you
backup
don't
kicker
win.
gets a ring at the Super Bowl if he's on the team.
Well, the big thing is everybody gets a trophy. Everybody on the team
Everybody
gets a trophy. That destroys the whole reason, the whole meaning behind a trophy.
But not just everybody on the team. Like Thomas's example with the kicker getting a Super Bowl ring, that's just reserved for the teams that make it to the Super Bowl. Not the
That's a
worst
good point.
teams. They don't get any rings.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so
They just get
what's happening here is
participation
They get a
trophies.
second job.
maybe they get removed because they didn't win, right? Yeah.
They're moving equipment for the winning team.
yeah. Cleaning cups and stuff. Jock straps.
Brutal.
Oh, that's nasty.
But yes, the participation trophy thing I have a big problem with.
And that's a metaphor, by the way.
Right, and I understand the concept that you don't want to hurt these children's feelings and you don't want them
Dude, I have my
feeling
feelings
beaten
hurt
down.
many times.
But
I know
it's
a
exactly what you
big
mean.
part
You
of
gotta
learning
learn
and
how to
life.
grow a skin, man.
Right.
That's it.
I think learning to win is a valuable exercise in
But
competition.
so is learning to lose.
Yes.
Learning to lose is a more important value lesson, a more important valued lesson to learn in competition than learning how to win. In anything that any of us here in this table or listening have ever done that you've been successful at, you didn't get it right the first time. You had to put in effort. And that is what losing is supposed to teach you.
And if you did, you didn't learn anything.
Right. If you're on a team sport, just for simplicity, and your team loses, a good coach would instruct the losing teams, like, what did the other team do better to allow them to win? And how can we work as a team to correct that and beat them next time we meet them here on the
Instead
field.
of just going, you guys are losers, you suck, I can't believe you even play on the field.
Or instead
kinda
of saying, hey, we're
mentality.
not going to keep score, and everybody wins today.
Right.
You know, and this has rolled over not just into team sports, but also into our education system. There are progressive schools that are experimenting with giving students fake report cards, right? So they've earned a grade, and they get sent home with a report card that gives them grades that would make them feel better about themselves instead of the grades that they earned.
What?
Yeah.
That's
right.
What's the point of the
you
report card?
lose accountability.
No shit. What's the point of the report card? The report card is to track progress that the student's doing. So if they believe they're getting all A's, they're not going to put in extra effort to earn them. They're just going to coast along. Or maybe they're not learning the material that they need to learn, so they move on to the next grade and they're not prepared.
So what do? They give them a fake grade with a caveat that, well, you really got a C in this, but we're going to give you a B, but you got to work harder to keep that B. I mean,
so where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Why even give them the fake grade in the first place? So
Isn't that-
I see this as kind of a slippery slope here,
Big time.
where eventually the student gets to high school, right? And they're a 4.0 student, and you're getting ready to be an adult here. What do they do in high school? Well, they're going to keep passing that fucking buck, right? So eventually the student's a high-functioning retard, but they've got a 4.0 on paper, and now they're going to apply at MIT, right?
Yeah.
What's MIT going to do? They've shown up with, and they don't have the skills to perform at that university. What if they start giving
But
them
on
participation points?
Oh,
On
gee.
paper, they work, right?
Yeah.
So now you have a student that graduates from MIT in aeronautical engineering with a 4.0, and they go to Boeing to get a job. Now what happens? Now we have jets falling out of the sky. Because gravity doesn't give a fuck about your feelings.
I'm just going to say I don't think MIT is going to bend
Yeah, well,
quite that far.
They're pretty progressive. You never know, right?
We have to take in X number of special students.
Right. Well, and I went to public school, and I saw several times where there'd be a student that was clearly not making it, but they'd been in second or third grade multiple times. At some point, they just push the kids along because they need to get rid of them. They need to get them out of the way.
Forever.
Yeah, I knew tons of kids when I was in like grade school, all the way through junior high and high school, that I was like, this kid is just getting a passing grade because everybody as a collective that works here at the school wants this person out of here.
So what happens to that person?
They
as an
usually end up
adult?
homeless, or they have horrible jobs or something, because the reality kicks in when you get out into the world. And this is why I've always said that, parenting should be a little bit more abrasive, is because the world is very abrasive.
Abrasive,
I lived in a car when I was 16. I got kicked out of my house when I was 16 by my jackass stepdad, and the world didn't give me an E for effort when I was in my car in January in Indiana and I had nowhere to go.
Yeah, they gave you an E for an empty tank,
Right? And they gave me a K for kicking in the ass, and I just fucking had to deal with it, And I think I see people that don't really. I know so many people have never had to struggle. They've always had parents just give them all the money they need, whatever they want to do, they just fund it. They just, so they've always had this mentality of like, well, I can do whatever I want. Somebody else is going to pay for it. Somebody else is going to do something. Well, I was 15, 16 years old. I had multiple jobs because I had to. I was trying to figure out how to eat. A lot of people don't. And we talk about generations back, just like the people who fought in World War II, that's, again, it's a fight for basic survival that we've removed. That's great that we've made every generation have to work a little less. That's what we should do. We should be progressing as a culture, but we need to be careful that we don't leave out the moral value and a structure that gives us some sort of definition and boundary.
And I'm careful to... I don't know if I like that working less, right? There's just as much work available.
Do you have to go take your food out of the yard, out of the farm, and kill it and skin it and milk the cow? That's
what I'm saying, though. There is plenty of hard work still to be done, maybe not with your hands. This is we were talking about this with the they took our jobs. What was that? The automate. I can't remember what episode it was now. Where we were talking about with Elon Musk, the AI one, yeah. And where Elon Musk had made multiple mention of as they keep automating jobs, it takes with machines and robots, it takes away work from people who were doing those jobs. Well, you're supposed to adapt. There's still just as much work. There's still just as much hard work. It's now more with your mind than it is with your hands physically. As we continue progressing as a society, I mean, and I've I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on the podcast or whatever, but if you guys want to look and see where this country is going and what it's going to be like, living here as a lower class, middle class, whatever you want to call us, not filthy rich person, just look at the countries that are older than us. Look at how it is in Europe. Look at how it is in China. Look at how it is in Japan. That's what we're going to be living like. Maybe we're not going to be staring at anime or into some of the same things that they're into. I didn't mean to pick on anime. That's the first thing that popped in my head. Maybe our forms of entertainment will be different, but it's going to be just like that. Overpopulated, crammed, hard to get a job, lots of unemployment.
Less opportunity.
But only if you don't keep up. You have to keep up. You have to make yourself worth something to someone else so that they'll pay you to do something for them. So I think there's just every bit of hard work as there always has before. It has just shifted. We don't have to milk cows anymore. We don't have to run farms. I mean, some of us. I mean, there's a lot of people who still do that.
What if I want to run a farm?
Well, hey, then you got to come up with more money to have that luxury. What if I want to be like Jack Johnson and grow up in Hawaii surfing and writing music? Because I would love to do that. No, sorry, buddy. You don't get to do everything you want to do, right? That's the thing. You don't get to be whatever it is you want to be. That was the lie in the first place. That's why it pisses me off when I think about that. It's like, you lied to me. I couldn't do that. I didn't get to go be a yacht tester because I don't know anybody who makes yachts. Not every job is open to every person. So that's why I kind of wanted to, I don't know if I want to say disagree with that, but I think there's hell of work out there, dude. There's tons of hard. I said hell.
I do agree that there's tons of hard work out there to do, but you also have a generation of people who are, getting A's for just participating in class.
Yeah.
So
that's BS.
I
wasn't one of those, so I didn't even know that was even happening.
I agree. I wasn't one either. I never, when it's funny, I didn't know what a trust fund kid was until I moved to California.
Yeah. Me neither until high school, until I met one or two, and you're like, what? There's money for you when you turn 28, 30, 25, whatever?
Yeah.
And your grandparents just left you money? I look at my grandparents like, what? My grandparents are probably going to leave me debt to pay for the funeral, for all of us to pitch in or whatnot. You know what I mean?
They're going to hope that you're available to pay for the funeral,
Man, that's ridiculous. So I think that there's still a lot of work out there. Just people need to work harder so that they know how to do.
But a lot of people don't want to because
talking
about pushing the boundaries. And you look at people do it all the time. They go to a job and they'll complain about this, complain about that. I know lots of people who have small businesses who have had to put up with a lot of crap from employees, just to keep from getting sued.
Oh yeah.
By these bratty little kids that think they should have all these extra things. We replaced union with entitlement. Unions back in the day used to give you, you can get, I remember my stepdad worked for Chrysler, and I remember one time my mom handed me a paper, and she's like, you want a good laugh? Because this was when I was like in my early 20s and working for a living, been on my own. And I was like, sure, Mom. She handed me this thing, and she's like, this is the list of things that the union auto workers are asking for in their contract negotiations. And I read through it, and I wanted to spit on all of them. I was
Why?
like,
What was it?
I was like, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm making $3.25 an hour. I'm still barely living out of my car, and they were asking for things like, extra 15-minute break, or we want to work 38 hours. We can get paid for 40. It was just everything. It was like free this, free that, free this, free that, free that.
You got to be careful when you go down that path, though. So I am very pro-union, and the reason I am is because how do you know that this is a great example. How do you know that the reason you were being paid $3.25 an hour is because you had no union representation? If you
I worked for regular businesses that couldn't afford to pay those rates, and a lot of businesses don't survive because they get forced into paying those rates. So a lot of people are unemployed because they're forced into having to pay what they can't afford to pay.
True, but a lot of entities can afford to pay it, and it just cuts into their profits, and they don't want to. So
absolutely.
It's like you can argue that one both ways, and that's why
it's a double-edged sword.
Big time. So I mean, there's definite advantages to unionization and grouping together like that.
I don't disagree that there isn't, but I've never been a part of that, and I've had to bust my ass, and I've had to work as an individual independent contractor with unions before, and the attitudes that people that work for unions give me is ridiculous and is completely uncalled for. And it reminds me of the entitlement generation type of an attitude.
And to expand on that, my father-in-law is a small business owner, and he's had employees that have stolen from him, or he had to let go for various reasons. And it's illegal to say anything bad about a former employee. Mm-hmm. All he can say is they did work for me.
Yeah.
He can't say that he would not rehire them. He can't say that they had, in fact, stolen money from him, or he can't
Yeah,
say...
but that also branches out of any type of union representation, too, because that also branches into defamation of character. You can't just be bad-mouthing somebody because... So, like, say if a reference calls, and then all of a sudden, maybe this person did steal from you and, raped your daughter or something. You can't... If you start saying that kind of stuff... I guess maybe if it was if they had committed a crime, but again, I don't even think you can say that because who are you to say
If they were convicted of a crime, you sure can.
you can? Okay, if they're convicted of a crime, okay, so maybe I took it too far with the rape your daughter thing, but anyway, they stole from you and
You
they
definitely
and
took
they-
it too far.
I was just thinking of a worse thing I could. I was like, what's the worst thing this person could do to this person? I was like, okay, no. So, but if they had
quick.
stolen from you, but there was no law, there was no criminal prosecution done for it or whatever, it was just minor stealing or whatever, or if you just didn't like the person and they didn't have a bad work ethic or whatever, because you start going into that defamation of character stuff, and what one person says, I didn't like the guy because he didn't work that hard. Well, maybe the amount that he did work would be perfect for the next guy. How can
Right.
you be bad mouthing him for what you set your standards for? Maybe your standards were too high, and or maybe you're just a slave driver, and you wanted somebody you could just own.
And I appreciate that, and I understand that the concept behind that regulation is to protect the former employee from being bad-mouthed by the former employer.
Yeah.
Right?
But I don't think it has anything to do with the unions, though. I think that's
No.
Yeah.
No, he's not a union guy, but it was just labor laws.
Low labor laws.
Right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's just across the board, not even related to the union.
Yeah.
But I just felt that kind of fed into the entitlement conversation piece here that we were having. Was that back in the day, you didn't have that. They could say, it's like, that guy's fucking lazy. If you want him, he's yours.
Yeah.
But he's not my problem anymore.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't do that anymore.
Definitely. Yeah, labor laws have changed that. So we're along the lines of work ethic. I wanted to talk about, too, there is, from my experience going to college, there was definitely a lot of people who had this sense of entitlement that once I get my degree, I should have a job. They should be lining up waiting to hire me.
$80,000 a year,
That's it.
right out the door.
Right out of the door. That's that was a funny thing to go through too, and I had gone through it knowing that isn't true from the very beginning. And but some of the students I went to school with, they just expected it, and they made no effort to go and get a job afterwards because they were like sitting there waiting. Hey, why haven't they come to me? Why haven't they come offered me a job? Even if you don't get to the point where you have like a number in your head, some went that far and like, this is what I'm worth, this is what I'm owed, right? Somebody's got to, some company should come to me and give me this money. Well,
You're only worth what somebody will pay.
that's right. And only if you can convince them to hire you and pay you, right? So, but some people went years. I know that they got degrees in electrical engineering and couldn't get a job in it. They were working for other things because they just couldn't figure out that they needed to put the footwork in. The work wasn't done once the degree was done. It's just as much work getting a job as it is working a job. It's just it has to become your new job, and if you don't put that time and effort into it, But I saw a lot of that. Like I should have a job by now.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and I grew up with a lot of people that thought because they went to a certain school or something that they were going to make all this crazy amount of money. And I'm like, it doesn't, just because if you go to Yale, you maybe got a better opportunity than going to, I don't know, Indiana State or something. Who knows? But
if you apply somewhere that cares about that too, that's the other thing.
exactly. But no matter what, really, I look at a college degree or something as sort of like a piece of paper that says, I did the basics to get me going in this direction. I want an opportunity. Now I'm out to try to make something of myself. That's how I look at it. But a lot of people don't look at it that way.
It's competitiveness is generally what
but
it
it puts
is.
you in the game.
Nowadays,
I've got a degree. I got a master's degree. What do you got?
Yeah.
If you're in competition for that job.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And that's one of the biggest reasons to do it is not necessarily that it teaches you how to do a specific job because it really doesn't teach you any jobs anymore. Maybe some majors do, but I know mine didn't teach me. I don't use anything. I shouldn't say anything. Foundational stuff, yes, but like the stuff that went off into depth or whatever, no, we don't do any of that where I work. And from pretty much everybody I know who got a job, in that field, they don't either. You have to be a perfect example of that since we're going along those lines. Intel, for example, has what's called Intel University. As far as I know, they still do this. When you get a job with Intel, you sit for over a year in a university with Intel University because you don't know shit about what Intel does, how to build a motherboard, how to build anything. You don't know you didn't learn that in school. You might have learned some general super low baseline foundational information on how to do some of the stuff that they're doing that's kind of relative or related rather. But no, they need to send you back to school, their school, to get you up to speed on their products and their workflow and their stuff. And while you're in that, not only you'll get some hands-on experience too, but you're going back to school right off the bat so that you can be made worth something to them. Yeah, and that's, that, so assuming you actually get in the door and get the job. Let's change gears here a little bit. A lot of people, a lot of the baby boomers in this article and out in the general internet that I was reading about, whatever, complain about their millennials not wanting to leave home. And
Tough shit.
Well,
Give them the boot.
before we go down this route, I want to throw out there are some examples when staying later is not, in my opinion, such a bad thing. And what I'll throw out there is I didn't leave home until I was 27. However, from the minute I graduated high school, I was paying $600 a month rent to stay in my room where I grew up.
That was probably pretty high for that time.
It was
just for
extremely high.
one room.
It's still high now. It's a I
Go
think
Dad.
Yeah, well, I'll take that back. I think my dad started at 200. Then after 2 years, it went up to 400, and then it ended up being 600 from like 2 years before I graduated up until it was time to move out. I told my parents, and I understand I might be an anomaly, just might be an anomaly, that I would pay rent, and I didn't want to move out until I was financially set or whatever, and I would never come back. I would never move back in. So
when did you tell them this? In high school? Or
I told them this probably
He was
in
like
college.
8.
When I was 8.
Yeah, Ben was born 30.
No, so I have to be, and the reason I wanted to preclude this going off in this tangent with this is because I stayed late, but I didn't not.
But you weren't a freeloader.
I contributed to the household. That was the point that I wanted to get out there.
And you weren't wasting your time. You were getting a degree in engineering. You were working a couple jobs. You weren't hanging out in the basement playing video games and eating Cheetos and shit.
No, that's true. But some people will look at it like, man, you're 28, you still live at home? Well, what's the circumstances there? I mean, I had a job as an engineer when I was 25 or whatever, so 3 years. I was saving money to buy a house and I was buying a lot of shit too because I had a real job and I was like, man, I was broke all through college. Anyway, so, so not all cases of people staying home was my point behind bringing this up. Not all cases of people staying home late in life. I do know a couple people who are 30 and still living at home, but they're helping out. And my family didn't have much money, so I mean, my parents really needed and used, that was helpful for them to have that money. It hurt when I left, not having that side
Well,
income.
I think another thing that did too, the fact that your dad was making you pay rent or whatever the agreement was, it was also getting you to understand that you needed to budget that amount of money to afford to live somewhere or be on your own. If you've never had to pay rent and all of a sudden you just leave, you're like, oh, how much is rent?
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be like $400 a month. It's $1,800. Oh my God.
Yeah, and it was ridiculous when I finally did get out, bought the house or whatever, and all of a sudden, I don't have washcloths, forks, cups. I mean, I don't have anything. I don't have toilet paper. That was a trip. So that cost a lot of money to get all that stuff, and then learn about all that stuff that mom had to pick up. Mom picked up on a regular basis every time she went to the store. I was like, damn, I never had to worry about keeping Kleenex.
I thought toilet paper just showed up.
Every time I turn around, there's something to wipe my ass with. It just keeps
Thanks,
coming.
Mom.
It's like these infinite rolls of toilet paper. It's awesome.
Have you gone back and specifically thanked her for all of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. I
You're
tell
a
my
good
mom.
guy.
I tell my mom all the time. Like, I have no idea how you. And I have mad respect for any stay-at-home mom or any woman who works and has children and all that. And juggles all that, because I mean that stuff is insane, dude. I mean. That's definitely one of the, if you have had a pie chart of the reasons why I don't have children, that is a huge section of, dude, I got better things to do with my time
Then buy you toilet
than
paper.
run around doing all the, taking care of all this stuff like my mom did for me. Now, I mean, obviously you would hopefully, well, I shouldn't say obviously, hopefully you would have assistance with that because you have a spouse, and maybe that makes it a little easier. But dude, nevertheless, you're both working hard on maintaining this. And it's like, no. Anyway, but that aside, there is a whole growing slew of millennials that are not leaving home. They do not seem to have a drive to fend for themselves. They don't have this, I have to, and I mean, I can kind of understand this more with females because of how it is typical that they raise, at least by my perception, it is typical that females are raised in this country as much more as caregivers. And what's the old saying? They Betty Crocker the girls and John Wayne the boys or whatever. Not so much maybe anymore, but nevertheless, it seems that a lot of girls are raised with little dolls and doll houses and babies and caring and nurturing, and like that's what they teach them from the very beginning. Even it's already there intrinsically, but nevertheless, they seem to emphasize it and push it. Whereas with men, it's more about, take care of yourself, be a big man. Don't, you have to be the breadwinner. You have to, whatever. You have this burden. Well, at least I guess not everybody has this burden, but in my opinion, what defined you as a man is that you had this burden on your shoulders that you had to, at the very least, take care of yourself. I mean, you need to be able to take care of yourself. You're not going to swim, boy. You'll sink. That's life. Your parents aren't going to be around all the time to, give you whatever you need, right? So I kind of thought that this was more of a guy thing from the girls that I met. A lot of girls don't necessarily, they'll sit around. I know quite a few that sit around living at mom and dad. They'll, pay rent or whatever they got to do, but they won't take that step to go take care of themselves, buy the house, get the career that works themselves up, whatever. So I kind of felt like this was more of a guy thing.
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I've heard it from people that have boys and girls and just parents in general. And even my mom even said this one time. She said, when people have sons, the sons generally grow up and move away. The daughters usually stay closer.
Yeah.
And almost everybody I know who has daughters, their daughters either live in the same city they do or stay closer. They're more closely connected to their family in that regard.
Yep.
But and that's just a different thing. But what I was originally wanting to say was, we're talking about moving out now or millennials staying longer. When I was 21, a good friend of mine and I had an apartment. And we had 2 stories of this old Victorian house that was awesome. Huge place, tons of room. We paid $150 a month for rent.
Yeah.
And that was in the mid-90s.
And that's the first excuse.
Today in California, you know what I mean?
That's the first excuse I hear from everyone.
It's legitimate.
It's legitimate to a certain degree. However, there are millions and millions of people here that figure it out.
Absolutely.
That's my point. It's like,
but it is a struggle. And if you look at like places, yeah, but if you look at places like Sacramento, I mean, when I moved here, you could get a studio apartment for $650 a month.
Yeah.
Because I had friends who had them in Midtown.
Yep.
Now that same place is $1,600 a month.
Yeah.
That's been 5 years. So things have gone up a lot. So
yeah.
I'm not trying to defend them, but as a person who has to pay rent in downtown Sacramento for the studio that we're in, I get it. I mean, it's really tough. And when you're in a more competitive job market and it's harder to get started as a young person, you can't afford these giant bills. I mean, I know a lot of really good kids that are in their 20s that are struggling and they still live with their parents and they're working multiple jobs and trying to go to school, just kind of like where you were doing, but they could not afford to do anything else. And I think we're making a transition where when I was a kid, it was still back in the days of oh, you got a driver's license, you got a job, get out.
Yeah.
And that was really the mentality. It was I'm done with you. Get out of here. Go be your own man, whatever.
You only support them until they're 18.
Yeah. And so now I think it's changed a lot because of the cost of living, the workforce, the competition to get these jobs, the population is bigger. I mean, I think it is generally harder to start out as a young person. I mean, I meet all kinds of artists and they come into my studio and they're like, wow, this place is amazing. I'm like, this is 20 years worth of building. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. This is 20 years worth of building. That kid's 22 years old. Of course they're not going to have that. It takes a lot. I just feel like it takes longer in the world that we live in now to really get established. So I'm not going to totally push that on younger people. Oh, you need to get out earlier. Not everybody has the opportunity.
It almost seems like we're coming full circle as far as the family unit and structure. Back in the 1400s, you had children. They grew up to take over the family farm, and the whole family lived in that same house throughout their entire lifespan. And
they started their own family at 14 years old.
Right.
Yeah, but we didn't. So back then there wasn't so much of the narcissistic me, I want mine.
It was
mentality.
A survival.
That's right. It was, hey, my family has always lived here. I'll continue living here, and maybe we'll build another house in the back because we had 7 kids. Mom and dad have 7 kids, and we got this ain't going to hold all of our brothers and sisters and their families, or what you kept people on the property. Because at that time I need my own. I want my own. I. That's where we kind of started with this thing with, right?
That was also back when you couldn't be anything you wanted. You were born into a farming family.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You were a helper.
They knew your job before you came out of the womb.
Right.
If you survived.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The fun part.
You get an infection when you're 6 and you're dead.
Yeah. And I kind of like that Thomas defended a little bit there the difficultness of some of these claims that millennials get, because I wanted to finish up this episode talking about some stuff I had read. Seemed to make a good point. Not everything about an entitled mentality is bad. there are actually some, if manipulated or worked or utilized properly, can be extremely advantageous with this to the properties of this mentality. One of the things is that if you are entitled, typically what comes with that is a sense of confidence. That is mine. I am sure of it. That is what I will go after. That is what I will achieve. That is a goal I will set that I will obtain, or that is something that I will get. You can turn that entitlement that you are this feeling that you are owed something, into the motivation and confidence, self-confidence, to actually manifest destiny, to make it happen.
So essentially what you're saying is that with that, they would be confident in being able to perform a task and then attempt it and put in the work.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it may be not looked at, I'm sure, or maybe it's not looked at as a sense of work. It's just, I will find a way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, maybe this is part of my, the effects of entitlement mentality on me, but that has always been my mentality is I will find, if I lost my job today, that would suck, but I will not fail and be on the street. I will find a way to support myself. I will find a way to get myself back on my feet. That's part of, in my opinion, that's kind of a sense of entitlement. I am entitled to think that I deserve and will find a way to at least take care of myself, keep my head above water, if not succeed.
That's in my mind. That's more of a leaning towards self-confidence, and
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
If you
And independence.
what I'm
right.
saying,
I don't necessarily agree that those two are tied together with the entitlement. Like,
not every time, but what I was trying to say is that I think when somebody feels very entitled, it can lend to.
okay,
That's what I mean. Not like that is the way to get self-confidence is to be entitled. That's not what I was saying. I was saying it can kind of lend to. I was trying to list out some good that can come from this.
He's trying to polish the turd.
I'm trying. Well, okay, it continues.
Keep shining, boy. Keep shining.
Polish it good there, boy. The one other thing that can come with that, this self-confidence, is the self-confidence and self-assurance to think outside the box. This can be very, very good. It depends on who has value on your thinking outside of the box. And one of the things that that I had noticed where that could be very very useful is one of the ways I look at the world is that you don't make what's my saying here? You don't make a dime in this world unless somebody else can make $1 off of you. So in that sense, if you go get yourself a job after school or whatever, you get yourself a job, period, somebody is paying you because they can make money off of what you do or what you produce.
sure.
It can be of value if that individual thinks that your new, fresh ideas that you are confident enough to actually pursue and follow through with are marketable or worth something. So this can actually make you, as the entitled individual who thinks that you can do whatever you want and do something out of the box, a more valuable asset to somebody who stands to make money off of you.
I feel like that's a general business sense, though. I mean,
Sure, but that's what I'm saying. One of the stretches is that sometimes these entitled people, and I've known people like this who think they can do anything they want and they'll go for it. It's almost like I don't want to say
They're not scared of failure.
That's yes, because they've never failed.
Exactly.
So they think of something and they go. That's an advantage to getting the trophy every time. I was always a winner. I'll figure this one out too. See, that's what I'm trying to come full circle
I'm
to.
following you there.
Yeah, but where's the
Okay.
safety net come in?
Well,
he doesn't need one because he's not going to fail.
Well, and if you do, then you fail hard, sure. But what if you don't fail and you succeed? Now nothing risk, nothing gain type thing, right? If you don't even, but the advantage to that is the disadvantage to living by the concept of nothing risk, nothing gain is that you know what you will lose if you lose at this risk. Well, if you don't know what you will lose, and then you don't fully understand the risk, and therefore
It doesn't
you're
cloud,
not afraid of it.
Well, it doesn't cloud your vision.
Doesn't cloud. That's exactly it. Yes, doesn't cloud your judgment. So you
You don't even think about it. Like, I mean, people who have been like, I've lost in a lot of things that I've tried to do in life. So every time I start a new venture, there is that small creeping in the back of my head. Maybe this won't work.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm with you. Though. If you erase that part of your mentality, you're like, everything works.
When I was
I'm
really-
the greatest.
When I was really young,
I'm Muhammad Ali.
I think the path to success is littered with failure, and you need that in order to grow and
Well, you
develop
learn a lot
plan.
from it for sure.
Yeah, but if
Exactly.
somebody is trying to make money off of you, they don't need you to learn or grow necessarily. If you are successful, if you've got an idea or something that they can utilize, or man, your art is amazing because you don't know that it can't be good. You just know your art, and you know that you're good at what you do, and you just keep going. You're not afraid of failure. You know you're not going to fail. You're worth money to me because you're a sure bet, and I'm going to keep going off it. I'm going to feed it. I don't want. I mean, if you fail, fuck, I'll just pick somebody else. You're a dime a dozen. Everybody's a dime a dozen. So there, so that's what the one kind of the mentality I'm trying to push there is that somebody else can look at you like a very valuable asset because you don't know that you can fail. I wanted to say something. When my father was when I was younger, my father used to sell cars, and they would come into the car lot. Sometimes there'd be a used car trade in that somebody would take in. They'd rip anybody off on a used car trade. Never trade in a car, guys. Always sell it privately.
Or burn it.
Or burn it and collect the insurance. Sure, we didn't say that. Inevitably somebody would trade in a car that was just a piece of crap. And all the guys, my dad would tell me that all the guys on the lot would say, yeah, nobody's ever going to sell that thing. It's a piece of shit. Well, one saying came from that was there's an ass for every seat, which is true for pretty much everything in life. Doesn't matter how ugly you are, there's an ass for every seat. But anyway, inevitably, he said there would be some new guy on the lot, new salesman, and they'd send him out there. Hey, there's an extra commission, $50 or whatever, if you can move that car. And a new guy hasn't been beaten down. He don't know any different. He's young. He's energetic. He'll go out there and he'll start pushing that car to whoever walks on the lot looks like it's in their price range. Maybe even if it doesn't look like a price range. And inevitably, he said that they would end up selling the damn car that nobody else would think that they could sell because he didn't know he couldn't sell it. He never seen a junker car worse than that, better than that, whatever. It was just a car to sell, and he needed the commission. And if there was an extra incentive in it for it, great. He went for it, or she. I don't know. Maybe there were girls back then selling cars. I don't know. Anyway. I don't know. He never told me about it. And it was pretty much a masculine-run business at that time. But yeah, so that was the concept. Is he didn't know that he could fail, so he went for it and he did it. There's also there was actually some studies that I did not read into, but that I had read mentioned that quite possibly entitled people can be more creative, like they're more creative people in general, and that may be because they are more apt to ignore convention. They just don't have to follow the same thing in their mind. If they want to do this, they do that. Again, kind of playing off of what I was talking about with like an artist, for example. You know, nobody said that they couldn't, that they had to draw within the lines. So they say, well, fuck the lines. I'm making art.
Fuck your rules.
I'll do whatever I want, right? This is my whatever. Me.
It's very punk rock.
Well, yeah, that whole movement was nothing but entitlement. Too. I was like, I can fuck the machine, right? I mean, what you fuck the machine? Why? You think you're better? Well, there you go. That's that whole entitled mentality. So don't tell me it wasn't in your generation too, right?
Oh, it's been in every.
That's right. It was starting since the silent generation, supposedly, which was the post World War II, which is how we started this. And the last thing was, it can be used to breed or feed a competitive nature. You think you should be the best because you're entitled.
Well, I know I'm the best, so...
You know you're the best. Well, go out there and prove it. Make me money.
I don't need to prove it to you.
But
My mom's been telling me that for 30 years.
Exactly.
I'm special.
Come on, ask her.
Dude, I got this, private bus to school every day. I mean, I'm just that special.
Yeah. So, but, again, that's a tool that can be tapped into and utilized to the advantage of those that choose to wield it in that nature. So, yeah, an entitled person who thinks that they are guaranteed or owed something, if you can shift their sense of entitlement into something that benefits you, now all of a sudden, go out there and be the top salesman because everything you sell makes me money. So I want you to think that you are the best.
So you're saying we should be hiring more entitled people?
I guarantee you this is not an idea that has slipped past those in sales.
I'm sure it has.
Until that entitled person is sitting around on the couch in the break room when they should be on shift trying to sell something, you just got to pay me, man. I'm entitled to this wage.
But that's a different mentality. That's not a competitive person. They're not trying to compete, right? These people, the type I'm referring to, are the ones that think that they should be the best, are the best, and then
still entitlement.
That's true.
I think that's the breakdown here. Is Ben's talking competition and Glenn's talking entitlement.
Well,
right.
I mean, entitlement can feed the competitive nature. I'm trying to take the positive sides.
I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that.
It's bullshit.
Hey, guys, I got to try to play devil's advocate here sometimes.
Stay off that devil's lettuce, buddy.
No, man, the devil's lettuce. I love that name for weed. Devil's lettuce. On that note, guys, I hope you found that interesting and you enjoyed it and that you'll join us next time. Thank you for listening. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes, or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.